this video, I'm going to talk about some of the differences between querying relational and non-relational databases and show a couple example queries for each. One of the main differences between the two is the languages they use to query. Relational databases use the SQL language to query data. SQL stands for Structured Query Language, and SQL is widely used, supported, and documented. It is a standard for relational databases. This makes it very easy to transition between two different relational database technologies, since the language will be the same. Non-relational or NoSQL databases, on the other hand, do not have a standard querying language. For example, querying in DynamoDB versus MongoDB will be different, and you would have to relearn how to query when switching between the two. Another difference between the two is the complexity of queries that can be performed. SQL is great for more complex queries because of the rigid structure and schema. SQL is also better suited for multi-row transactions. NoSQL queries are better used for querying large amounts of unstructured data. Now I'll move on to showing a couple example queries for SQL and then a couple for NoSQL using DynamoDB. I've set up a very basic database that has customer information along with orders that are related to the customers. A very basic SQL query is to select all records from a table. So as you can see, we have a select statement here that selects all records from the customer table. And if we run that, you'll see we get a list of all the customer records in our database. Here's an example of another basic SQL query that gets all the customers from a certain state. So as you can see, we select all from the customer table where the state equals New York, and this where statement will filter based on what condition we give it. This final SQL query using joins is a more complex query and is a good example of a query that is really only capable using SQL on a relational database. As you can see, we select the distinct customer name as well as the sum of all the orders that customer has placed from the customer table, which we use a join to then only get the customers that have placed orders, and finally a where statement that only gets the customers in New York. This more complex query is a good example of how SQL lets us manipulate the data to get exactly what we want. Now I'll show you a couple simple DynamoDB queries to show how a NoSQL query may look compared to a SQL query. This first query is similar to the SQL one. It will query the database and return all the records that contain the city New York. You can see the setup for this query looks a lot different than a SQL query. We still give it a table name, then an index name, then we give it the condition we want to evaluate, which in this case is that the city has to equal New York. If we run this query, you'll see we get back all the records that have city as New York. This next DynamoDB query is similar to the last one, but we add a second condition that says the age of the customer must be greater than 29. And when we run this one, you see we get all the customers from Chicago that have an age greater than 29. Hopefully you now have a better understanding of some of the differences between querying relational and non-relational databases, and that these example queries give you an idea of what queries may look like between the two. If you're looking for more information on what kind of database system would be best for you, contact DB Services and we'll be happy to help.